This is Alan Campo, who's a really good artist, and right in the beginning, his story is the first one in the book. He says, "It's really a very hard feeling to express since it is so rare in such a place, and I am of course always nervous and happy to see familiar faces I think of as friends. It's crazy to think that I've seen PCAP members more than my brothers and sisters in the past 13 years. This becomes my practice at communicating with the free world. I don't get the chance to speak to or get opinions and advice on my art like is available when PCAP comes in. Sure, I do have family that visit when I let them and other prisoners who are friends, but it's a different type of interaction. You smile, are genuinely interested as if you were shaking my hand at some art studio instead of behind prison walls, looking me in the eye and speaking truthfully as a person and artist, and it's just so darn far from how every other day of prison is. It's so incredible to me how you've managed to find this pinhole of an opening and chose to keep driving in."
Hey everyone, welcome back to Living the Next Chapter. I have another amazing guest with me. Janie Paul's with me. We're going to be talking about the new book that's coming out, Making Art in Prison, Survival and Resistance. It's a new book coming out. I'm looking at Amazon right now. June 16th is the date I'm seeing, and I'm excited to have Janie on to talk about the book. Already getting good response already. Janie, welcome to Living the Next Chapter. Nice to have you here.
Thank you. I'm thrilled to be here, actually.
It's really good. You've been on some other podcasts, and I think that's amazing. As an author, getting on and sharing your story on a podcast, it's so cool to hear the story behind the book. And to meet you as an author. I think as we see the book on the shelf or on our online site, we have a little bit of an understanding of who that author is, and we connect with you. And when we come to see the book, it's a no-brainer. I'm going to buy the book as soon as it's ready. So it's great. Awesome. Let everybody know where you are in the world, Janie.
I'm in Ann Arbor, Michigan. I was a professor of art at the University of Michigan, now retired. So that's what brought me here to Ann Arbor.
Nice. How recently did you retire?
I retired in 2017.
Okay.
It's been a little bit of a while. And, I didn't really have to worry about what am I going to do after I retire, because I was working on this book. And retirement gave me, an opportunity to have a lot more time. And it's pretty complex. The book is, collaborating with the artists and lots of pieces to put together. So that's what I've been doing since I retired, mostly. Besides making some art, I'm a studio artist, but I sort of put that on the shelf a little bit while writing this book. And now I'll be getting back to that more.
Nice. So take us behind the scenes of writing the book, Janie, like making art in prison. I know I'm a musician, so I know music has made its way into the prison system as a way of helping people and bringing people together and, sparking creativity for inmates that are looking for an outlet. And, but the idea of art in prison, I'm fascinated by this. Where did the idea come from? What was the genesis for this?
For the book?
Yeah.
Well, it turns out that people are making art in prison all over the country. I mean, in all prisons, people are making art because for a few reasons. One is it's commercially viable. People can sell their work to other incarcerated people and to officers in mostly three commercial categories: doing tattoos, making greeting cards, and doing portraits of family members. So if I'm an artist and you come to me and you give me a picture of your daughter, and you say, "I'd like a drawing," I say, "Great, I'll do this," and usually barter for things at the store or whatever it is. So art is going on. That's something I think a lot of people don't know. It's already going on, whether there's a program or not. But the program that I am with was started back in 1990. The Prison Creative Arts Project was founded by my late husband, Buzz Alexander, in 1990. And then in 1995, I moved to Ann Arbor, and we were both doing arts workshops in prisons. and teaching classes in which our students went into prisons to do arts workshops. He was in charge of the theater and the writing, and I was in charge of the visual art. That's one thing that most people are really surprised by, that actually students go in, undergrads go in, and it's a wonderful experience for them. And it's proved to be wonderful for everyone, the participants in the workshops and the students. In 1996, Buzz and I decided to do an exhibition of art by Michigan prisoners because for two reasons, which really became clear over the next few years of doing the show. The two reasons are, one, to support the growth, the artistic and personal growth of people living in prison, and two, to bring the art out into the public so people, ordinary citizens who don't know much about incarceration, could see the humanity of people who were locking up. Because both of us were deeply disturbed by our incarceration system, which is based on a kind of brutal form of punishment that actually doesn't work, doesn't do anybody any good. And we have in the United States we are the most incarcerating nation in the world. And it's only been increasing. We have, since 1973, the number of people in prison has increased 500%.
Wow. 500.
Yeah, that's why we call it a crisis of mass incarceration. More and more people being locked up for violent and for nonviolent crimes. And other, Western industrialized nations don't have this, and they have lower crime rates than we do. So if you want, I can talk about the reasons for that, but that's a sort of a sidebar. But I do want people to know that we have a system that not only doesn't work, but is brutal and humiliating and degrading for people.
Yeah.
And it doesn't help them once they get out.
Right.
It's up to the individual to provide their own system of growth and resilience in order to make it when they get out and they're faced with lots of challenges. So we feel that the book is called Survival and Resistance because art making is both about just surviving in the prison, but also it's a form of resistance to the prison system just by making art.
Right.
And I can explain that if you want.
Yeah, I'd love to go down there. Let's talk about that.
Okay. Well, first of all, in the most general sense, you could say that prisons are about making people invisible, about identifying them by a number instead of a name.
Right.
It's about degradation and humiliation, as I said before. Art is about growth and spontaneous new discoveries about a future that contains possibility. Because when you compose a song, or you write a poem, or you make a painting, then you're thinking about the next one. And then you're starting thinking about the next one. And you have a future. Whereas prison, if you're serving a long sentence and you're in prison, the future is very bleak. So it's a way of resisting that kind of time. I see that when I looked at all of the work, I tacked up hundreds of images on my studio wall to start thinking about what made this work so compelling and so intense. And then what I saw was that underneath all these images are huge wells of unmet needs. So people are making images of affection and love because they're not getting that in prison.
Right.
Or people are doing extremely skillful, developing high levels of skill and doing highly technical work because they're not able to use their skills in a job in prison. They're making images about faith in order to support themselves and their soul, etc. So first of all, the subject matter and the use of materials, etc., is a kind of resistance But beyond, even at a deeper level than that, art is about creating meaning, really. It's about whether that can be articulated or not. You can look at an abstract painting that's beautiful and you can't say, oh, it's a picture of a mother holding a child, so it's about love. But it has a meaning that resonates with you in a nonverbal way.
Yeah.
And the artist, in resolving the painting or the sculpture or whatever it is, has a sense of self. I made this. I am an artist. This means something to me. And that's resisting the meaninglessness of prison, the
Right.
environment that doesn't give any particular meaning to life. Another thing that I want to mention is that people make art, particularly three-dimensional art in prison, out of trash, things that are found. And this is something that's really fascinating. I'm sure a lot of listeners don't know about this, but somebody will collect this leftover soap in the showers and then make a beautiful soap sculpture out of soap and toilet paper, or toilet paper and glue, cardboard, pieces of cut up cartons, dirt, stones from the yard, just anything. I mean, almost every physical material can be turned into a piece of art. And so I see that as a metaphor. It's like, I mean, it's literal and it's a metaphor. So people are making treasure out of trash.
Right.
And the metaphor is that they're being conceived of as trash.
Mm.
But they're making themselves have value.
Wow.
By making beautiful things that can be cherished.
Yeah.
And one thing that I love to see, when we have these exhibitions, we have a big celebratory opening reception. And of course, the artist can't come to the reception, unfortunately. But I've seen wardens or people who work in the prison come, and they're excited to look for their artists, the artists there that are at their facility. And sometimes they buy the work. And one day I was looking at one of the wardens at the sales table, carefully carrying this piece of art and buying it. And I thought, wow, the power dynamic has really shifted here.
Right.
In prison, the warden has power over the prisoner. And now the prison artist has had the power to create this beautiful work of art. And the work of art has power in itself that made that warden want to buy the work.
Right.
And so that's another kind of form of, I don't know if I'd call it resistance, but it's a wonderful kind of reversal of power dynamics. And so it's all really fascinating. Lots of dimensions to it all.
Yeah. And what I find too, like I'm a musician and I like art as well, but I find that in the limitations that we have in life, whether it's materials, cost, like money, time, wherever the limitation is where our creativity really seems to thrive. If I have every paint possible, every material possible, tons of nice space, no limitations to my materials, my creativity seems to slow down because there's so many options. But when I have limited options, my creativity seems to thrive. And I'm wondering if that's something you've seen through your work as well.
Absolutely. I mean, someone could be at the highest level of security, and all that they're allowed is a little rubbery pen that can be seen through for security reasons. Perhaps a pencil and a state-issued piece of white paper. But the person has the ability to choose anything that's in their mind.
Right.
Just with that simple pen or pencil can come anything. And I think that this is another mode of resistance. is to have the ability to make choices, because in prison you don't have many opportunity to make your own choices.
Right.
For things. So, but you can choose to do anything on that piece of paper. It can be fantasy, it can be realistic, it can be markings, it can be, you could have a story, you could be a dream, it's endless. And it opens up the mind, and maybe that person then comes down a level to level 4, where they can have a few more materials.
Right.
And they're in our show and they sell their work for, say, $50. Then they can buy a packet of colored pencils.
Yeah.
And then they can learn about that. But given the extreme restrictions, and I think this is what you're saying, they treasure those materials so much and get the absolute most out of them. Like, how can I use a piece of graphite? How can I use a colored pencil? I mean, I've seen people use ordinary art materials in astounding ways, that I've never thought of.
So let's talk a little bit about the practicalities of showing up at our local institution, and you have all these materials. You want to come in and work with these people and helping them. What are some of the things that you've had to deal with when approaching and getting something like this in a prison to help inmates and to work with the community? What kind of things did you have to kind of navigate in the early days?
Oh, first of all, we don't bring in materials. They have to provide, the artists have to provide their own materials. So just to straighten that out, we're not allowed to for security reasons.
Okay, that makes sense.
They're very restrictive in terms of what can come in and out. Yeah, in the early days, people weren't really used to the idea. Mostly the Department of Corrections in Michigan has been very supportive of our projects. Only a few staff members or people in high up positions were resistant to it. But things that we have to navigate, first of all, every year the show has to be approved by the Department of Corrections. We just can't go in and say, okay, we're doing this.
Yeah.
Every year it has to be approved. All the materials have to be approved.
Right.
So, for example, if I'm going in to teach a workshop, there's something called a manifest list, and anyone who works in or visits a prison will know what the manifest is. You have to list everything that you're bringing out. So, bringing in. So, if you're bringing in 10 brushes, 10 brushes have to come out.
Yes, exactly.
If you're bringing in art books to show, they can't contain any nudity.
Yeah.
And that's, a lot of art books, if they're historical, of course, there's a lot of nudes in them.
Yeah.
So, but there's obviously a whole range of books that don't. You are subject to the scheduling and what happens in the prison at any given time. So when we do our selection visits, for example, one time we went into the women's prison and we were working with the women, looking at their work, and somebody unrelated to this group, but in the same space, had some kind of fainting spell or something happened, and suddenly everything was shut down.
Yeah.
We had to go into a different room and wait for about 2 or 3 hours. And then we were told to come back at a different date. You never know. You could be doing a workshop or doing a selection visit, and all of a sudden there's an emergency count, which means everybody in the prison has to be counted. And things are kind of shut down for a little while. Pretty much anything can happen. So, or someone may retire from being a special assistant, a special activities coordinator, and they are the people who we coordinate with. They do athletic programming, any kind of programming. They're, well, you could have a very friendly person and suddenly somebody else comes into the position who isn't, or they're doing budget cuts and suddenly that position is no more.
Right.
Some other overworked person has to handle things, and
Yeah.
they don't have time to respond to us. So
Yeah.
a lot of that is just any kind of bureaucracy, but in a prison, their power is absolute. I mean, there's not much negotiating. I have to say, though, that my late husband, Buzz Alexander, who was an amazing person, spent a lot of time in the beginning meeting with people in corrections and explaining the work and having a lot of person to person. That was before,
Mhm.
Zoom, email, and so
Yeah.
much,
Yeah.
and the person to person connection was very important. I mean, he really crisscrossed the state, going to different prisons and different places to show up, to say, we're really doing something that's wonderful for your facility. So by and large, people have been people in the department have been very helpful. And I think what's happened is over the decades that we've been doing this, they see the benefit. They see the benefit for the incarcerated people. They also see the benefit for their own security system. Artists don't get into trouble. I mean,
Right.
they're basically all they care about is doing their art. So they're happy to have people doing art.
Is this something that's all across the US? Or is it in certain states? Can you talk a little bit about that as well?
Actually, it is all across the United States. I
Okay.
don't think there's something exactly like our program, which I think is unique for the length of time we've been doing it and the kind of construction of our project, which is that it's not only an exhibition, but it's a kind of pedagogical project where we meet with the artists, we talk with them, we give them feedback. We're really involved in their growth, and we have extensive ways of making them feel part of what we're doing. We make a video of each work in the show and shots of the opening reception. And that's edited and sent to all of the prisons where the artists watch it. And it's an
Nice.
incredible tool because they get to see what each other's doing, and it ups the drive to do
Right.
really good work. And they may see, oh, this guy, so and so used to be here, but I haven't seen him in 5 years, because they're not allowed to write to each other.
Right.
So suddenly they see this other guy's work, oh, I'm glad to see he's doing so well,
Yeah.
Anyway, that's all to say, I think our project is pretty unique, but there are wonderful programs going on actually in every state in the country.
Good.
There's a coalition called the Justice Arts Coalition, which brings together online all of those projects. And some are just for one of the arts. Some are, one art, there might be someone going in and doing a choir, or there may be someone doing a poetry workshop, or there may be a project like ours that deals with all of the arts. But there are artists, individual artists and arts organizations all over the country that are going into prisons. It's really grown over the last few decades until there was really a need to have this coalition to bring things together, and people are very active in the coalition. So if anyone is interested in any state, they could look up that, Justice Arts Coalition and go to their state and see what's happening. Also, the way we started, Buzz, my husband, started this before I came to Michigan, but he just, he was contacted by somebody who wanted to do a theater workshop in the prison, and that's how he got going. But after that, he would just contact prisons. He would contact a good liaison, like maybe the special acts coordinator, or perhaps the warden, and just say, I'm a professor at the University of Michigan. I'd love to offer a writing workshop. Don't have to be a professor. It could be just, I'm a writer. I would love to offer, individuals and groups can approach prison facilities.
Yeah. I think that's amazing. Can you share a little bit about the book then, Making Art in Prison? tell me a little bit about what your thoughts were writing the book. What were your hopes for as the book goes out into the world? Who is this for?
Well, it's for everyone. It really is. I really wanted people to know what's going on in prisons. This incredible art. The book has over 200 color reproductions. So it's a big art book.
Nice.
With a lot of text. It has my commentary, and it also has 16 first-person stories by some of the artists. So you get really to hear from them. I wanted to, as I said, I wanted people to know about the brilliance and talent of these artists. These artists are just in Michigan because of our project is in Michigan. But really, there are artists everywhere in prison. So this is an example of one state's population. I also want to make the point that art is a human need that arises in many situations, but is particularly urgent in living a life under oppression. And I think when you get to the end of the book and you've seen the work, or even maybe before getting to the end of the book, you see or you feel, you may not be able to articulate it, but the depth of feeling and expression that you see in the work, you identify, because all of those things that they are expressing about love, about isolation, about fear, are things that we all feel. And so I think it really touches us all. So it's about really the power of art to reach inside and touch our own humanity and maybe be an impulse for readers to either appreciate art more or perhaps even make it or do it, whatever the art form is. It's also points the way that, though I don't say this explicitly in the book, to the importance of art in our culture and in our schools. Because after all, most of these people were just ordinary people who had never made art before. Right. And the fact they learned it and they're doing such brilliant work, what does that mean about us as people?
Yeah.
You know, more people could be doing this. It's just that they're in this urgent situation. Mm-hmm. I also want people to know about the kind of the horror of mass incarceration, that, people could be an hour away from you living in a prison, or even half an hour away from you living in a prison, and they're invisible. You don't know what's going on there. And I don't go into in the book. I'm not interested in going into describing the terrible things that happen in prison. That's not really what my book is about. I do allude to that, but the book is more focused on the resilience of people living in an oppressive situation. And so I want people to be aware that right around them, there's this invisible world that is going on. And I want them to be moved by the art and hopefully really question what it is we're doing with people who are imprisoned, questioning the system that we have, and possibly trying to do something about it.
That whole thing about being out of sight and out of mind, right? Then you're not thinking about these people and the loss of humanity in all of this as well, right?
Exactly.
And I guess that's the one thing that people have to kind of wrestle with is there's people that have ended up where they are because of certain acts, and there's some portion of that is because of the act that put them into that situation. There's but there's different levels of people that are incarcerated. There's, and I just kind of struggle with a little bit, I think, where people just think that because you've made a mistake or something's happened in your life to put you in this situation, that it's deserved. And I don't know, that's a thing to wrestle with, right? Because
It is. It is.
I just feel they're still human beings.
That's
right?
what I'm glad you brought that up, because I do think that a lot of people listening might be thinking that. People do. I mean, it's natural to think, well, this person committed a crime. Shouldn't they be, this person killed someone, or they robbed my nephew, or, whatever. They raped somebody. Well, that's true. And we should deal with that. That should be dealt with. It shouldn't go unanswered.
Right.
But I do believe that there are better ways to deal with it than extreme punishment. The punishment. So say you did a robbery or 2 robberies, and you go to prison for 40 years, and you're 20 years old, and you get out when you're. Who has that helped? Really, nobody. Well, people will say, well, that person won't commit any more robberies after now. But if we had better community services, and there are other ways that people can be prevented from transgressing like that.
Right.
We put more money into healthcare and jobs and daycare and schools and so forth. These crimes would be reduced drastically. I mean, so that the overall picture is that we're relying on punishment, which comes from, our puritanical past and from the dungeons of England and Europe. It's really ancient, to solve this problem. It's not solving the problem. We don't have we don't have a lower crime rate the more we imprison people.
Right.
And also people should know that people who commit murder have the lowest recidivism rate. That means the rate at which people return to prison. So if you go to prison because you killed someone, and you get out, you're much less likely to go back to prison than someone who was in prison for drugs or for robbery.
Yeah.
Because those people have really had to come to terms with what they did. Now, I do believe that there's certain psychopaths and really devastatingly horrible people that need to be put away from society. But my feeling is, it's similar to my feeling about the death penalty, which is just, I don't believe in killing people. And you could say, well, would you kill so-and-so, the worst person you can think of? No, because I don't believe that people should kill people. Similarly, I don't believe that we should treat people like animals, which is what, people who are in the deepest level of security have no human contact. They have terrible food. They leave lights on all the time. I mean, they're really being tortured.
Yeah.
So I believe that it decreases our humanity as a culture to treat human beings like animals and not like human beings. So even if someone has to be locked away because they would be a danger to society, we should still treat them as a human being, because that's just what we need to do to preserve civilization as a group of humans.
Talk a little bit about the volunteers and the people that bring art into the prison and work alongside these amazing artists. What does it do for them as they go back to their cars in the parking lot and go home to their homes? What are they saying about their interactions and by bringing art into this community? What does it do for them?
It has a huge impact on all of us, students, volunteers, curators. Every time one of us leaves the prison, we feel a great sense of satisfaction and intensity of being alive. At the same time, we feel incredibly sad and angry that we're leaving and they're not.
Right.
So it's this real mix of feelings. I'm glad you mentioned that. What is it like to leave the prison? Working inside in workshops or on selection visits is a very heightened, intense experience because you don't have that long in this situation, and you want to cut to the chase,
Yeah.
And so incarcerated people tend to do that. They can't stand dishonesty or people who aren't authentic.
Wow.
You have to be totally honest. Like if there's a group of students going in to do a workshop and one of them is very skilled and another one isn't, that person should say, look, I don't know much about drawing. I'm here to help. I want to work with you. I'm going to be doing this alongside with you. If you really need to know more about, 1 point perspective, you should ask so-and-so.
Yeah. Don't fake it.
You never would pretend that you know more than you do. I mean, just the fact that you go in, you're committed to it, and you return every week is really important.
Right.
And if you do really know your field, then you just feel like, I want to share this. If you, as a musician, go in and maybe they have instruments or maybe they're just singing or doing percussion, you just feel like, I want to, they are so eager. They're sitting there like, with like looking at you and, they're the best students. I've been teaching in a university and elsewhere, art schools, for my whole life. And I would say these are some of the best students you can get because they need it and they're so eager for it. So you're filled with the great satisfaction. And I've been influenced as an artist by all of this. Actually, my artistic practice has, I think, benefited. I have included them as an audience for my work. Not that they actually see my work unless I send them images, but just in thinking about them. In other words, I've incorporated some of the qualities that they live with into my own practice. So I went back to using some very simple materials, inventing kind of new ways of using materials, some very detailed work that I saw and really responded to positively, feeling like I could have all the time in the world to do this and really focus on it. That's for me personally. Other artists may have a different kind of response that, has influenced them. Yeah.
Amazing. Okay. So I have one more question I want to ask you, Janie, but before I do that, as far as connecting with you and buying the book and where it's available, where you're most active online, if somebody has a further question or comment for you, where do we go and how do we connect with you?
Great question. Okay. To connect to me, I have a website, which is very simply janiepaul.com. And the book is now highlighted when you first get to the page, but there's a contact. It also includes my artwork and, all things about the book, but there's a contact tab where you can leave a comment and reach me there.
Okay.
So that's one thing. Then the publisher is Hat and Beard.
Okay.
Hat as in on your head and beard on your face. Hat and Beard Press. And it's actually great to order the book from the publisher. It's a small press that is very dedicated to unusual books like mine. And I like to support them because they're doing great work and they get more money if the book is ordered from them. But the book can be ordered from Amazon and I think Barnes and Noble and a couple of other places.
Okay.
The book release is officially June 16th, but it can be pre-ordered now. And if you want to find out any more about the organization I'm with, the Prison Creative Arts Project, you can go to that website, which I can't remember the address, but just Googling Prison Creative Arts Project.
Okay.
Known as PCAP, PCAP. And then we have on the website a tab for exhibitions, and there you can see all the work from the last few years. We didn't put all the work up digitally until I think 2019 or 20. So that's even more work to look at. The work in my book is kind of a selection of some of the best work, over decades, but you can see more there.
Awesome.
That covers it. Is there anything?
Yeah, no, and we'll make sure we have links in the show notes for all of that as well, so you can go straight to that. So my last question, Jane, before we go, we talked about what it feels like for the volunteers and the people helping and bringing art into the prison system. Just before we go, talk a little bit from your experience. What is it like for somebody from within the prison system who comes into these classes and the humanity displayed back to them? What does it mean to them? Do you have any example that you can share as we close of feedback you've heard directly from someone in the prison system that meant something to you personally?
Yeah, maybe I could read something from the book, actually.
Oh, good. That's even better. I love that.
Let me just see. My mind is going to the introduction. Okay, here's one of the artists said this. To be frank, without the PCAP program in my life, I would truly have been a lost soul in a sea of wasted lives. It was a godsend to wash up on the shores of this program, and I am grateful every day for the chance to be. I can only think of the soliloquy, to be or not to be. That is the question. With the option of this program, I chose to be, and indeed I am.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
I'm going to try to quickly find something else. Okay. This is Alan Campo, was a really good artist, and right in the beginning, his story is the first one in the book. He says, it's really a very hard feeling to express since it is so rare in such a place. And I am, of course, always nervous and happy to see familiar faces I think of as friends. It's crazy to think that I've seen PCAP members more than my brothers and sisters in the past 13 years. This becomes my practice at communicating with the free world. I don't get the chance to speak to or get opinions and advice on my art like is available when PCAP comes in. Sure, I do have family that visit when I let them and other prisoners who are friends, but it's a different type of interaction. You smile, are genuinely interested as if you were shaking my hand at some art studio instead of behind prison walls, looking me in the eye and speaking truthfully as a person and artist, and it's just so darn far from how every other day of prison is. It's so incredible to me how you've managed to find this pinhole of an opening and chose to keep driving in.
Wow. That talks about so many of the things that we spoke about in our time together, right?
Exactly.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And that to me tells me that all the effort, all the thinking, planning, dreaming, hoping, that all went behind the scenes for you and your husband all the way back to the beginning to today is having an impact on people and bringing humanity back into this part if it's devoid of that, right?
And for thousands of people. If you think, I haven't talked about the scale of the shows, but every year we have about 500 artists participating with about 600 or 700 pieces of art. So since it's been going on for 27 years, it's thousands and thousands. And of course, there weren't as many people originally. It's grown, but that's thousands of people who have influenced. And it's one of the reasons I wanted to write the book. So when you get communication like that,
Right.
You want to show the world, wow, this project actually did this, you know.
It's amazing. Awesome. So yeah, the book Making Art in Prison, Survival and Resistance, available June 16th is what I'm seeing here online, but definitely pre-order the book. And I would ask everyone to please leave a review and let everyone know how amazing this book is, because that also then helps other people find this and add this to their library. You and your husband have been living the next chapter this entire time, is what I love. That's the name of our show, but you are demonstrating this on a regular basis, and thinking of your husband and thinking of all the things you've done together, and now you continuing to do. It's amazing. Thank you for sharing the stories of those that we don't get to hear from, and bringing some visibility back to those that we might have not be thinking of at this point.
Thank you so much for having me on. It's really been great.
So everyone, please go check the show notes, and everything will be included there. I would love for you to go and support, and let Janie know that you heard her here on the podcast. And thank you for making time for us. I really appreciate it.
Great. Thank you.
All right. Thank you for subscribing and following. And you're listening this far in the podcast, so you are my best friend. I'm sorry, but you are now my best friend. So welcome. Nice to meet you. Thank you for being here. LivingTheNextChapter.com has a link on the website to our Facebook group. Are you on Facebook? Probably. You can go there and you can actually interact with our guests. You can talk to them. You can hear more about their journey, about their books. You can speak to them directly. You don't need me. You can come right over to livingthenextchapter.com, click on our Facebook link to our community. You can talk to other listeners of the podcast from around the world who are on Facebook. And, again, speak with our guests. Don't you want to speak to the guests you just heard from? Yeah, you can do that on Living the Next Chapter. Go over there. There's links to our Facebook group, and you're welcome to join. Thanks for listening.
Mindshift Power Podcast, the podcast for teenagers and those who work with them. There's a huge problem in America today. There's a very large disconnect between teenagers and the adults who work with them. I'm looking to bridge that gap with real, raw, honest conversation, not held back by the chains of political correctness. You cannot solve a problem you do not understand. Want to understand teenagers today? Listen to this podcast. This podcast is for teens in the U.S. and Canada. To learn more, go to fatimabay.com/podcast or just look for Mindshift Power Podcast on any listening platform. I look forward to you being a faithful listener.